All right. This is the Branford Marsalis interview on Sunday Newport Jazz Festival. Branford Marsalis. Branford, you're a native of New Orleans, are you not?
Yes, I am a native of New Orleans.
Born and raised there?
I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana.
And who had the heaviest musical influence on you down there, other than the members of your family?
Well, obviously, other than the members of my family, no one did, because I wasn't particularly known as a musician in New Orleans. I was more known as like a rebel without a cause. You know, I made bad grades in school, and I was proud of it. And I was in this funk band, so I guess my major musical influences were like Earth, Wind & Fire and Ohio Players and Elton John and Led Zeppelin. Not much jazz, though.
And is it true that you started playing the piano in the 3rd grade?
Yes, and I started playing the piano in the 3rd grade, and I hated every minute of it. And I just was completely unwilling to practice. Well, actually, it wasn't even the 3rd grade. I started playing the piano when I was 4 years old. And I played the piano until I was in 3rd grade, and then when I saw there was a school band there, I couldn't wait to get any instrument just to not play the piano. So I got a clarinet, and I didn't like that much, but it was better than playing the piano.
And when did you switch to a sax?
I switched to saxophone when I was 15 years old. I got it for Christmas, and I was so happy. I practiced for 2 whole weeks, and I just I didn't practice again until I was 19.
Branford, you've played with, over the years, with various groups, and I recall the Herbie Hancock group and the Lionel Hampton Band. Is there a big difference between that kind of work, the small group versus the Hampton Band?
There is a tremendous difference between working with small groups and working with big bands. Working with big bands, you have to, it's much more difficult, I think, because you have to keep up your emotional intensity. And it's like being, well, it's not even like that. It's like being in a pop band, because you have to play the same parts every night for 100 gigs straight and pretend as though you're enjoying it each time. And that can be a bit tedious when there's no variation. With small groups, you don't play the same solos every night, so there's something different to make you appreciate it more. But it's really difficult to put forth enthusiasm to the audience when you're playing the same thing every night.
Gotcha. Branford, you're only the truly acoustic group on the program, but you played with Miles and Sting. And how do you feel about electronic versus acoustic music?
I mean, electronic music is electronic music, and acoustic music is acoustic music, I feel. I feel that electronic music is more effective in certain areas. I don't really feel that it's very effective in the jazz arena, because a lot of the things that record companies and press, they call jazz, I don't consider it jazz. Because when you listen to the history of jazz music, you know, artists like Louis Armstrong and Lester Young and Charlie Parker, and you hear that music, you don't hear anything that's reminiscent of that music in the electric music that they're calling jazz today. And I know that one of the rhetorical cop-outs they're using is that, you know, music has to grow, but for it to be called something, it has to be indicative of that something which is being called. And when you hear guys playing solos, and it's like they never listened to a jazz record in their life, I find it very difficult to call that jazz. A few groups like Weather Report's early years and Chick Corea's early years, I would consider that definitely jazz influence, more jazz than pop. But for the most part, I don't consider it jazz at all. I still like it, though.
I've heard that you constantly vary your repertoire. You know that's true. You've played with Monk, Ornette Coleman, Coltrane. Obviously, the jazz tradition is very important to you. Can you comment on that?
Well, not just the jazz tradition. The jazz tradition is very important to me, but tradition in general is important to me. I feel that, and my parents instilled this in all of us, you know, all 6 of us, that in order to do well in any field that you endeavor in, you have to understand the tradition of that particular field, whether it's like sweeping the streets or playing baseball or playing music. It's like you have to be very grounded in the tradition and the fundamentals of that school of thought, or you don't excel. You may excel real quickly for a shortened period of time, but you don't have any longevity unless you really understand the tradition, because that's the foundation of anything you build on.
I understand that you've made over 400 albums.
Huh?
Over 400 albums?
Me?
You've appeared on, or was I misinformed?
Come on, that is a gross misinformation, my brother. That's gross.
I got that out of today's program.
Jesus, they said that? I gotta find the man who wrote that and pay him some money for lying like that.
Well, you did do the LP Dream of the Blue Turtles, though, didn't you?
Yeah,
Sting.
On my estimation, I would have done maybe 40.
Well, I guess it was a misprint then.
That's a serious misprint.
Wrong 0.
You dig?
But good for you, bad for him.
Yeah, right.
The album Blue Turtles with Sting, was that an interesting gig?
It was a very interesting gig for me because I hadn't played any rock and roll music since I dedicated my life to jazz, which I was 19. So it was roughly 6 years at that time since I had played any kind of like pop music. So I was extremely, extremely rusty when I started. The first 4 months of the tour, I mean, I don't even consider the record, because the record I was basically playing like bebop licks over funk changes. The live record we did, I would consider much more of like I would consider the live record more as like a pop album from my perspective, like as a saxophone player, playing in that tradition, more so than the studio album. You know, it took me a while to get into the hang of things and stuff like that, because it's not like the popular misnomer among jazz musicians. I think jazz musicians, more than anybody else, can play anything. More than any other artist in any other fields can play anything, but you have to understand the tradition from which those things come from, and you have to play it a little while. You're not just going to walk on the stage and play it with a blindfold on, which is like a popular misnomer amongst jazz musicians.
I got you. Brian, what does the Newport Jazz Festival mean to you?
An extra $3,000. No.
Let me ask it again.
Okay. Come on, man.
What, truly, this is singularly probably the biggest, the most renowned jazz festival.
It is definitely the Newport Jazz Festival is without a doubt the most renowned jazz.
Start it again. Right?
That must be Howard Johnson coming in.
Yeah. Start it again, that's great. Go.
Okay.
You guys take your party over there someplace?
The Newport Jazz Festival.
Ready, go.
The Newport Jazz Festival is without a doubt the most renowned jazz festival in the world, I would think. It was the first jazz festival started by George Wein. And it's definitely, I mean, like the Newport records with Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington and Miles Davis and Monk at Newport and Coltrane at Newport. I think it's a very significant festival. I'm glad that it's back on the scene again. In terms of acoustic jazz, it's not what it was 20 years ago, but times have indeed changed and the scope of music has changed. I think that it's a great idea to have a broad scope of music on it because it does attract more people and it reflects the times. Plus the atmosphere is great. I mean, it's cool for me. I wish we could stay here a couple of days and go jet skiing on the water and get thrown around and stuff.
You're a young man, young, new in the business, on your way to tremendous success as a musician. You have a wonderful reputation for being in it so few years. Truly. What kind of advice would you give to the young people that are watching our show and getting into this business?
My advice to any young people that are interested in getting into the jazz business, or I can say any business in general, is to really know what you want to do and prepare yourself with the necessary fundamentals and research, you know, and understanding the tradition. I think that I can't stress that enough. Understanding the tradition and the foundation, so you just don't sound like a bunch of other guys who like sell lip service about how much they like jazz and want to play it, and they sound like garbage. Fundamentals, tradition, and you can't go wrong. And belief in yourself. Don't have anybody else tell you anything. You know, just believe strongly in yourself and your own personality. You can't go wrong.
You are part of a remarkable family, Branford. Really a remarkable family. Enormously talented.
Thank you.
Truly, I think we are gifted with your presence in the music business. You've brought new life to jazz. I think you're bringing young people into a business that kind of had a downhill curve for many years. Just tell me something about your family life, your brother, your father, the other folks.
Well, in my family, I'm the eldest of 6 boys. The oldest being 26, almost 27 actually, 27. And the youngest being 10. We grew up in a typical, it's like, you know, we grew up in a typical household, I think. You know, there was a lot of love in my family, but we had our arguments, and, you know, my mother fought with us until the day we left the house. You know, the rooms were never clean. We never wanted what she wanted to cook. It's like the same stuff that real people have to go through, because everybody thinks that our family was like, you know, oh, let's play jazz for breakfast and jazz for lunch and jazz for dinner. Wynton didn't like jazz until he was 12. I despised jazz until I was 19. My dad would put a jazz record on, I would leave the room. And then they would leave the room when I put on a Led Zeppelin record. They would be just out of here, you know. They'd go to the front of the house. You know, we have a great relationship with all our brothers, and my parents are like our parents are like our best friends more so than our parents. Like, I can honestly say if we have any problem in the world, we can talk to them about it and not have to worry about, like, you know, when I was your age, you know, the typical, they understand really well. You know?
That's great. It's very rewarding, isn't it?
It is. It's great. My mom's actually coming around after all these years.
One final question. This is a loaded question. This is a Barbara Walters question. When it's all over, 50 or 60 years from now, Branford Marsalis is sitting in his rocking chair and reading the reviews and counting his money, what would you like to have written about Mr. Marsalis?
Me?
You.
I don't know. Branford Marsalis was a crazy person who enjoyed life to the fullest. And that's all, actually. You know, enjoyed life. You know, he's a good musician, but he had a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure.
All right. Good stuff. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. Thank you very much. Be nice. We'll just use all of it.
Okay.
Thank you.